welcome to Building Your Best Brain podcast. My name's Sylvie, and thank you for tuning in. It's been a while since I've recorded a podcast. I had been meaning to, at the time, edit a few, but I had a trip coming, so right now I'm recording this podcast in Mishima Lodge in Okazaki, Japan. I'm here for a 2-week conference. Well, it was a 2-day symposium and a 2-week training on a specific microscope. And so I'd been quite preoccupied with the packing, preparing. I gave a presentation, which was really wonderful. I'm having a really great time. I honestly can't believe that I'm here. I have to pinch myself, wake up, and I'm casually in Okazaki. But anyway, it's taken me about a week or so to feel a bit more like myself with the jet lag and all of the things that come with traveling and eating new things and getting acquainted to a new bed, and feel really inspired to share something that's near and dear to my heart, which is this connection between the breath and the brain. And it's something that I talk about quite a bit on Instagram. It's also something that I share quite a bit in small doses, of course, in my yoga classes. And I know in yoga classes, there will be some teachers will sprinkle in things like diaphragm breathing, vagus nerve. And I think sometimes what's lacking in our understanding of the brain breath mechanics is this more kind of holistic approach, or the full story from start to finish. There's many different parts of our breathing, many different body parts involved, many different processes involved, and experts will often focus on one area and not the entire thing, as experts do, right? If you're an expert in something, you kind of know the ins and outs of one particular topic. That's what makes you a subject matter expert. And what I'm hoping to provide today is the full story of the breath and the brain and all the parts that are involved, so that you can gain an appreciation for this incredible system. But then you can also have this understanding and know how to apply it in your day-to-day life. Breathing has been one of the most powerful tools for me in terms of regulating my nervous system and being a healthier, happier human being. So with that in mind, what I will try to do without any diagrams. So maybe one day I'll change this to a YouTube video because it'll make more sense. But for now, I'll do my best to use my words as a little crayon and draw out to you from the brain all the way to the lungs and the diaphragm, what happens when we breathe and how is this impacted when we're stressed. So just like our stress response, our fight or flight response, breathing is a part of our autonomic nervous system. So when it comes to our peripheral nervous system, which is focusing on the nerves that leave the spinal cord but also come in the spinal cord, they can get separated into two bins, the autonomic versus the somatic. And the big differentiating factor is being conscious. So somatic is often conscious movement, whereas autonomic is your other physiological responses that don't require you to think about it. So breathing, heart rate, digestion, all that good stuff. Rhythm in which you breathe is found at the back of your brain. So we often call it our hindbrain or our lizard brain. And the structure I want to focus on, which is my favorite word in neuroscience, is the medulla oblongata. This structure will send signals to your muscles that are involved in, will send signals to the muscles that are involved in breathing. And we'll talk about those in a second. And the way in which it knows that these muscles need to be contracted or relaxed is through the pH of your blood. So the medulla is sitting again in your lizard brain, and it's really close to our blood-brain barrier. So our brain is covered with all these blood vessels in which will send oxygen and nutrients to your brain. And the reason our pH is a good indicator of our respiratory needs is because when oxygen is converted to carbon dioxide, it actually in our bloodstream turns to carbonic acid. So basically the level of hydrogen ions, so the acidity of our blood, is a good indicator of where we're at in terms of our respiration. And so the medulla has these cells that detect pH using chemoreceptors. And then there's a really kind of simple and beautifully crafted feedback loop that happens with these inputs. So when our chemoreceptors detect that we have a lower pH, so we have more carbon dioxide in our blood is more acidic, the medulla will send signals to the respiratory muscles to increase ventilation rate. And so what this means is that the volume in which our lungs have, right, because our lungs are like sponges, they really do take up the volume that we give it, will decrease. So our ribs will come in, this will increase the pressure, and this will allow the removal of carbon dioxide. So this allows us to exhale. And as the system is so beautifully crafted, the inverse can also happen. So when we have less carbon dioxide in our blood, we have this increased pH, which means our blood is a bit more basic, right? It's a bit more of a base. The medulla will send signals to the respiratory muscles to decrease the ventilation rate. So this will focus more on the inhale. So this will look at stimulating an increase in volume, and we'll talk about the muscles involved in that. And this will increase our ability to take up oxygen. And so this is the signals that our hindbrain is controlling, and this is a part of it, right? So this communication pathway is incredibly important. But of course, the muscles that it signals to is arguably equally important, right? That they are, listening, responsive, and structurally sound so that the system is optimal. And when it comes to the muscles involved in our breathing, we have our main muscles, and then we also have accessory muscles. So our main muscles are the diaphragm, which I'm sure we've heard all about. And so the diaphragm sits right above your stomach, but also under your heart, your lungs, kind of in the couple bottom of your ribs. And it's this really large flat muscle. So it's kind of connecting all 360 degrees of this space. And through it, nerves can run through it, blood vessels can run through it. Then we have the muscles of the rib cage, which we call our intercostal muscles. And we have them on the outside of our ribs, and we also have them on the inside of our ribs. And they play two different functions that I'll talk about in a little bit. And then, of course, we have all the abdominal muscles. So this includes all the muscles that are around our core. So we have the rectus, which is the muscles in the front, the obliques, which are the muscles in the side, and the transverse, which is this kind of deep core that we often talk about, which is this big belt of muscles. And the accessory muscles are the muscles that will help with this extra lift to increase volume or decrease volume. And that's the muscles of the upper back, the muscles of our chest, as well as even the muscles in our neck. And the way or the sequence roughly, because it's hard to put this all in a step-by-step functions because they really happen all at the same time. But when we are inhaling, so we're creating volume for our lungs, the diaphragm will flatten. And so it travels down towards the stomach. And this is when the muscle is engaged. So you'll have your stomach kind of protruding out. And this muscle that's normally a dome-like muscle that fits underneath of your lungs and your heart will flatten all 360 degrees in every single direction. The external intercostal muscles that are on the outside of the ribs will lift the ribs up and outwards. So the ribs, which is interesting, is it's actually a joint. So it's a joint between your sternum, which is this muscle kind of in the front of your chest, and it almost acts like a hinge. So I like to think of the ribs as kind of like a blind, when you can turn them. and they're in a closed position and you slowly open them up and the light peeks through. That's our ribs, and that's what the external intercostals are doing, lifting up and out. Then we have our neck muscles and our pectoral muscles that'll help with the upper ribs to lift them up a bit more. And this allows for maximum volume of the thoracic cavity for the lungs to take up the air and get the oxygen. The biomechanics for our exhale is, of course, similar but in reverse. So to decrease this volume, because of course the volume to pressure is an inverse relationship, right? So when I decrease the volume of something, I'm increasing its pressure, which will help with the carbon dioxide to leave the lungs. So the external intercostal muscles will relax. And then the internal intercostal muscles will take over. So they'll engage and they'll pull the ribs downwards. And then you also have your abdominal muscles, right? So your rectus, your obliques, that'll continue with this process of pulling the ribs downwards. And then your diaphragm will relax. So it'll come back to its dome-like shape where it's not, kind of going downwards towards the stomach, pressing all 360 degrees, and then air will leave your lungs. And so there are a few ways in which when we're under stress, the biomechanics do not become as optimal as they could be. So when we're under stress, when we're in our sympathetic state, our fight or flight state, our body believes that we need to have oxygen ASAP, right? So we're kind of burning off the sugar, right? We're getting our energy molecules and we need oxygen to burn off the sugar and have energy molecules, just as kind of an example, because there's lots of stuff that goes on when we're stressed. And so we need to breathe quicker. And this might mean, right, that we don't need to use our diaphragm, right? We can use our upper chest and neck to get a quick increase in volume to suck up the oxygen. And what this does over time is that we don't use our diaphragm to its full capacity. So it'll stay in this dome-like position and won't engage and flatten. And this can result in a tight diaphragm, which you may have heard of before, or a diaphragm that has knots, basically. And so it's this interesting loop where if we don't use our diaphragm to breathe, it'll become knotted and tight, which will make it more difficult to use, which means that we're less likely to kind of easily get into a parasympathetic state, right? So it's this interesting loop of, if our breathing mechanics are not optimal, then our brain is always going to read our pH in a way that it's like, oh, well, we still need to be doing this, right? We still need to be getting more oxygen. We still need to be in a fight or flight state. Look at what's happening with our breath. And then our breath is like, well, I can't get into a parasympathetic state because my muscles are not cooperating. This is also the reason why when we're stressed, we can often have tension in our neck, or this is one of the reasons why it's common for us to have tension in our neck, because we're using our neck and upper chest to help us breathe and not using our main muscles that are built and strong and capable of doing the heavy lifting for us. And this is not irreversible, and this is not something that I want to add more stress into your life. That's definitely not the intention of this episode, but the intention is, our muscles, all of these muscles are accessible, even our diaphragm. And it's something that doesn't take an insane amount of energy or lots of money or expertise to work on. And you do see really potent effects quite quickly. And so if you're interested in learning a bit more about the exercises you can do, definitely drop me a message on Instagram or drop a question in whatever platform you're listening to this to, be it Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast. And I hope you can walk away with a deep, loving appreciation to how intelligent your body is and how it moves in marvelous synchrony with each other, with all the different systems, and that your breath is unique in the sense that it is an unconscious process. You don't need to think for it to happen. But once you apply a bit of conscientiousness to it, be it at the level of your muscles, be it at the rate of your breathing, that you can tap into your brain quite easily. So thank you so much for your attention and energy. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'm looking forward to chatting again soon. Thank you.